What's up, everyone? Today I'm out at the farm. It's early July and it's early on a Sunday morning, and I came out to just kind of check on some plants. I usually come out here every other day, so I thought I'd share with you guys a little bit of what's changed since last fall. So let's take a look around. Okay, so just to start, right here behind me is a section of larger plants. Most of these are things that I either bought for using for cutting stock or to buy and hold on to for a while and work on, maybe sell later. So there's a bunch of the Kishu mother stock here, and then I recently picked up some large Itoigawa plants. These guys are nice coloration, and recently I've been thinking that some of the Itoigawa that we're propagating here in Northern California maybe isn't actually the Itoigawa that we think about that it is. So I'm hoping that these guys actually have the coloration and the texture and size of foliage that we're looking for when we say Itoigawa. Here under the shade cloth, and I'm in the shade right now because of this oak tree behind me, I have a lot of more deciduous and broadleaf evergreen trees as opposed to the conifers that are out in full sun. And right here are some Cork Oaks. These guys are in their second year, and they came from a friend of mine who lives up in the Sacramento area, and he collected them off of the UC Davis campus, which is covered in Cork Oaks. I decided I wanted a fresh batch of Cork Oaks. I ordered some Cork Oak seed off the internet, and I'm not sure whether it was that the squirrels got all of them or that the acorns were old and didn't sprout. But this year I've had less luck with seed starting than I've ever had before, including seeds where, for example, the Zelkovas that I started growing a couple of years ago got another batch of seeds, and instead of getting about 100% germination, I got about 0% germination, which is kind of crazy to think about using the same technique, same greenhouse, all of that kind of stuff. It just goes to show that maybe buying seed off the internet is not as reliable as one might hope. All right, so behind me here I have a block of the Grewia occidentalis Lavender Star Flower, and these are really nice plants, and the good thing is that they make a lot of really nice flowers, and pretty much all summer, starting in spring, as long as it stays warm and sunny, they're flowering. And the bees really love them, and let me grab. So they backbud really nicely. I trimmed back a few of them to encourage low branching, but I don't even really need to do that because as soon as you cut them back, regardless of how big they've gotten, they basically bud out all over the place. It's kind of interesting to watch them grow, but the downside of them is that they really take a while for the trunks to start to bulk up, especially if you keep them in small containers like this. So we are also growing out some to be larger plants in gallon containers. So if you saw the fall farm tour that I did in fall of 2021, you'll recognize this black pine root over rock as the last tree that I covered. Since then, in June, so just like a month ago or so, I cut off the biggest portion of the sacrifice branch here and have transitioned it to this secondary sacrifice branch, which I've also got staked here. The tree is in a colander and I'm watering it like a bonsai, but I didn't move it for quite a while, and so the roots have gone straight through the weed cloth that I use here into the ground, and the tree is kind of growing like it's in the ground, which is interesting. So I'm hoping no hiccups when I separate it from the roots that have gone into the soil. Because it still has all of the roots that are here in the pond basket. I'm going to do that this winter to kind of slow it down and make sure that I get distributed root growth rather than just like a couple of large roots with no fine roots around them, put it in a new colander, and basically put it back here for another year or two to continue developing. And this tree is still in early development. I just published that video talking about early, middle, and late development, but really I'm still working on creating the trunk. So I've got the rock and the roots set here, and I'm trying to fatten up this portion of the trunk and create that trunk line that I'm after. And meanwhile, I've been cutting back the longer branches that could potentially be part of the design. So everything from here up will be removed eventually, and then this portion is going to be the tree. So it just takes quite a few years. I've been really happy with the way that these junipers have been growing this year, because most of them have 6 or 8 inch long shoots for the year, which is at least double what they did last year. And because the majority of these have already been wired, anything that isn't intended to be used for grafting stock has already been wired. They already have kind of like low bends in the base here, so we're going to be using these for workshop material, as well as potting them up into small containers and starting to style them. And there's a lot of variety in here, but these the ones here that are in front of me, closer to you guys, are ones that were wired last year. And then we've been wiring all of these guys with maybe sort of a secondary wiring for some of them, primary wiring for others, but basically creating movement in all of that core of the plant. And then a certain portion of these will be potted up into larger containers in the coming year. But one of the things that we did over the winter, and actually there's still a few that I need to do, is to take the trees and put them in these Anderson flats and put about 1 inch of soil underneath them in the Anderson flats. And that has, I think, really kind of done the trick in terms of creating more room for the roots to run. So you can see these roots are just kind of popping right out of the bottom of the pot into that soil that's in the flat, which increases the vigor, just like same trick that's used for creating healthy mame when you have them in tiny containers. And this is a block of the same Japanese black pines from the Alameda tree that we were selling as bare root over the winter. So they all got potted up and wired into these 3-inch containers and are growing on for this year. Not seeing as good of growth on these. We had a late frost, which actually ended up killing some of them because we'd already transplanted them. But still, the ones that are continuing on look pretty good. There's a little bit of variation in the color, which is kind of interesting, and could be due to variations in the size or mixture of the sizes of perlite particles in that particular container. It's kind of hard to know for sure. In any case, we'll be starting to release these as starters in the fall, and those will be the Alameda seed source, which has sort of proven genetics in terms of bark. In fact, this already looks like it has bark starting on it, which is kind of crazy because it's not even a full 2 years old. Get these willows. There's a willow tree down by the creek, and these willow seedlings come up everywhere. And I sort of wish if I could just sit a flat on the ground and have all of the willow seedlings come up in one flat. That would be fantastic. But instead they decide to come up in all the pots. And so then if I'm going to transplant them, I usually end up killing them. And if I don't transplant them or pull them out and treat them like a weed, then they end up taking over the container and even getting their roots down through the weed cloth into the ground. By the end of the year, they'll be like 2 feet tall or more. So as you can see, there's quite a few 3-year-old Japanese black pines in these 6-inch pond baskets that I'm growing out to get bigger trunks. And I'm not going to say that it's without problems. Some of them are doing better than others. In fact, this one is actually one of the smaller ones. But one of the things I just wanted to point out was basically that in the spring, well, late spring, in kind of middle to late May, I came through and I cut off a lot of the side branching at the 2-year node. And so the 1-year node and the 2-year second year growth has all been wired, and then the 3rd year growth has been so far left to grow, except for the side branches. So the center bud on the 3rd year growth has grown, and then I am leaving or cutting those side branches back while leaving the center to grow on. And that's sort of to separate out this into making wood, while the rest of this starts to become something that you can work with as the tree moves from early development into middle and late development. Yeah, so here's another example, a little bit bigger. So, you know, all these branches were cut back and there's nice little buds starting off basically exactly where I cut them, and not far behind. There's a little dead bud here, but this ultimately is what's going to keep the growth down here tight enough to make a bonsai out of it, instead of having to later graft it back because there's no branches where you want them. So this block of elms is getting pretty fun and interesting, and every time I come out here I've got this maple mixed in with them. It's a seedling off of an Itoigawa, a mature Itoigawa tree, and I think I've actually used this in a couple of videos, but it's kind of funny because I stuck it in this tiny little container and grew it for a few years, and then decided that I wasn't happy with it being quite that small. So it's got some good movement in it, and it's really starting to get some interesting bark. I've got some low branches here, and then this large sacrifice branch, and it's definitely happier out here than it was in my yard in the city. A lot more sun and a lot more heat. We've actually had problems with some of these elms. All of the watering out here is still manual, and so as we come up and down the rows, sometimes the things at the end of the rows seem to get missed. And so let me pull out one here that got fried. So I don't know, sometime maybe a month ago or month and a half ago, 2 months ago, all of the leaves on this turned brown and fell off, and then it sent out a new set of leaves. So it dried out enough to obviously stress it to that point, but not enough to kill it, and now it's on its way back. Obviously that's going to set the tree back in terms of the trunk fattening up, but glad it didn't keel over completely. These trunks have all been wired only once, and a lot of these branches are going to be too big, so I'll have to come back through here. I don't have, well, it's all relative. For a nursery operation, I don't really have that many of these, and so I'm actually going to be using a lot of these sacrifice branches to continue propagating, making a lot of cuttings from these. Actually do quite a bit of weeding out here. It's kind of crazy, even with the landscape fabric and everything in containers. I have to come around and weed on a regular basis to keep things from taking over from the plants. This block of olives has been growing really nicely through the spring and early summer here, and I'm hoping that continues. Last year they kind of sat around doing nothing for quite a while, so I'm happy to see that the roots are established enough and they're actually starting to wood up a little bit here at the base. And these are actually all cuttings from a friend's tree, and I selected that tree specifically because the leaf on the tree was so small, and there's actually these are from a different source that didn't have quite a small leaf, and so I actually don't think I'll be propagating these. They're a usable leaf size, but since these are smaller and it's just as vigorous of a plant, I'm going to continue propagating from this stock in order to continue making more olives. All right, well, time for me to get to some watering and weeding, so I'll be out here for probably an hour or two just making sure everything's watered, and then back to my garage / studio to work on some more bonsai. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.